Good morning. Welcome to today's story, a touching, humane, and educational tale.
The day Mara Quinn aged out of foster care, she inherited a dead drive-in theater and a question that would not leave her alone. Why would a family she never knew leave her something no one else wanted? This story will show you how abandoned places can hold buried truth, how pain can distort what we believe about the people who left us, and how one broken inheritance can become the beginning of dignity, courage, and belonging. On the morning of her 18th birthday, Mara walked out of the County Youth Services building with 2 duffel bags, a manila envelope, and $312 to her name. No balloons, no cake, no one waiting by the curb. Just a wide Texas sky, pale and washed out, and the dry wind pushing dust along the parking lot, like even the ground had somewhere better to be. She stood there for a moment, slim and still, with her dark brown hair pulled into a loose, tired ponytail. Her denim jacket was faded at the elbows. Her boots had a split seam near the toe. Everything about her looked careful, guarded, and worn down by years of learning not to expect softness from the world. Inside the envelope were the usual papers: release forms, identification copies, a list of community resources written in cheerful language no one actually used, and one letter that did not belong with the rest. It was from an attorney in a town called Red Vale. At first, Mara thought it had to be a mistake. People like her did not receive inheritances. They received instructions, deadlines, final notices, warnings about what would happen if they missed rent, missed work, missed one more step. But the letter was real. A woman named Rosalie Quinn had died 6 weeks earlier and left Mara her only remaining property: Starlight Drive-In Theater. Mara read the line 3 times, then gave a short, humorless laugh under her breath. A drive-in theater. Not a house. Not money. Not even a piece of land with a trailer on it. A dead business in a town she had never seen. She nearly shoved the letter back into the envelope and walked away from it for good. But clipped to the back was a second document. A purchase offer. $50,000. Cash. The offer came from Voss Development Group, which described the theater property as distressed, unsafe, and unsuitable for rehabilitation. The wording was clean and professional. The message beneath it was even cleaner. Take the money, don't ask questions. For a long moment, Mara stared at the number. $50,000 was more money than she had ever imagined holding in her own hands. It was a used car, a security deposit, a small apartment somewhere nobody knew her name. It was survival. It was escape. It should have been an easy decision. But one thing kept pulling at her. Quinn. She had grown up with almost nothing attached to that name. A few broken facts. A mother who was gone, no father in the picture, files full of vague language and missing pieces. She had spent most of her life telling herself the same hard sentence whenever the silence got too loud. If somebody had wanted me, they would have come back. By noon, she was on a bus headed west. The ride to Red Vale took most of the day. Dry fields rolled past the window, faded gas stations, feed stores, churches with handmade signs out front. Small towns that looked like they had once believed in their own future. Mara kept the envelope on her lap the whole way. Near sunset, the bus dropped her at a stop beside an empty diner and a bait shop that had gone out of business years ago. Red Vale looked tired in the kind of quiet way small towns sometimes do, like it had been holding its breath for too long. She could have checked into the cheap motel across the road, could have called the number on the offer and signed the papers by morning. Instead, she started walking. A mile outside town, just off an old county road, she found it, the Starlight Drive-In. The sign leaned sideways, half-eaten by rust. A few letters had fallen off, leaving the name broken and strange against the evening sky. The ticket booth sat crooked near the entrance, its windows cloudy with dust. Beyond it stretched a cracked field where rows of cars had once parked beneath summer stars. And at the far end stood the screen, tall, silent, torn at one corner, still standing. Mara stopped at the edge of the property and said nothing. The wind moved through the weeds. Somewhere, metal tapped softly against metal. Then her eyes caught something nailed beneath the old marquee, almost hidden under years of weather. A small wooden plaque, family-owned. Mara swallowed hard. For the first time that day, the money in the envelope did not feel simple anymore. Because standing there in the fading gold light, staring at a place that should have meant nothing to her, Mara felt something deep and unsettling shift inside her chest. Not hope, not yet. Just the faint, stubborn feeling that this broken place might know something about her life that nobody had ever told her. Mara did not step onto the property right away. She just stood there at the edge of the gravel entrance, one hand curled around the strap of her duffel bag, staring at the giant screen as if it might turn and look back at her. The place had the lonely, weather-beaten look of something that had once mattered deeply to a lot of people, and then had been left behind all at once. The ticket booth leaned a little to one side. The speaker posts stood in crooked rows through the field like old gravestones. Tall weeds pushed through cracked pavement. A faded concession stand sat dark and still beneath a sagging awning. Everything about it should have told her to leave. Take the offer. Sell the land. Keep moving. That had been her plan all day. But plans had a way of feeling solid from far away, and strangely thin once real life put its weight on them. Mara stepped through the gate. The chain hanging from it gave a dry metallic rattle in the wind. She walked slowly, boots crunching over gravel, bits of broken glass, and pecan shells scattered from years of birds nesting where people used to gather. The evening air smelled like hot dust, old wood, and sun-baked metal. It was the kind of smell small towns kept in their bones. She reached the ticket booth first. The paint had once been bright red. Now it had gone chalky and thin under the Texas sun. She wiped at the dirty window with the sleeve of her jacket and peered inside. An old cash register sat on the counter. A stack of brittle ticket stubs leaned against the wall. There was a coffee mug with a chipped blue star painted on the side. Not trash, not abandonment, not exactly. It looked more like somebody had stepped away in the middle of a season and never made it back. That thought sat heavier on her than she liked. She moved on toward the concession stand. The side door stuck halfway before giving way with a hard groan. Inside, the air was cooler, stale, and thick with years of stillness. Dust lay everywhere, soft as flour. Behind the counter were rusted popcorn machines, syrup pumps, paper trays, and a menu board with prices that belonged to another lifetime. Mara set her bag down. For a moment, she just listened. The hush inside the place was almost church-like. Then she heard a voice behind her. "You must be Rosalie's girl." Mara turned fast. An older woman stood in the doorway, one hand resting on the frame as if she had every right in the world to be there. She was in her late 60s, maybe early 70s, with silver hair twisted into a loose bun and a sharp, intelligent eyes that missed very little. She wore jeans, sensible boots, and a denim overshirt with the sleeves rolled to her elbows. Mara straightened at once. "I'm not anybody's girl." The woman took that in without flinching. Then she nodded once. "Fair enough. Still, you've got the Quinn face." Mara said nothing. The woman stepped inside and offered her hand. "Dottie Bell. I used to run tickets here summers. Then concessions when Rosalie's knees started giving her trouble." Mara looked at the hand, then shook it. Warm grip, steady, no pity in it. "That helped." "A lawyer sent me," Mara said. "I'm just here to look around." Dottie's mouth twitched like she had heard more than the words themselves. Mara glanced away. "What?" "Nothing." Dottie looked around the room, then back at her. "Just that folks who are only here to look around usually don't carry both bags in with them." That landed a little too close to the truth. Mara crossed her arms. "I got an offer already for the property." "Yes," Dottie said quietly. "I imagine you did." There was something in the way she said it that made Mara's shoulders tighten. "You know about that?" "Oh, honey," Dottie said. "Everybody in Red Vale knows Calvin Voss has been circling this place like a buzzard in church clothes." Mara let out a dry breath despite herself. That was the first thing anyone had said all day that sounded honest. Dottie walked behind the counter and touched the old register with surprising gentleness. This theater mattered here. Friday nights, Saturday nights, first dates, church fundraisers, 4th of July cartoons for the kids. People brought lawn chairs when their cars broke down. Your grandma kept this place alive longer than anybody thought she could. Mara frowned. "My grandmother." Dottie looked at her then, really looked at her. "Yes, and your mother too." The words hit hard enough to still the room. Mara's face cooled. "I don't know anything about my mother." Dottie's expression softened, but she did not step closer. "No," she said, "I suppose you don't." Mara picked up her duffel again. "Well, whatever this place used to be, it's not that anymore." She turned toward the door, but as she passed the back office, something caught her eye through the half-open frame. A wall covered in old photos, summer crowds, pickup trucks, teenagers on hoods, children in pajamas. And there near the center, Pinned beneath a cracked, yellowing flyer was a photograph of a young woman smiling beside the ticket booth. Dark hair, sharp eyes, same chin, same face. Mara stopped cold. Her breath caught so suddenly it almost hurt. Behind her, Dottie spoke in a low, careful voice. "I told you," she said. "Your mother stood right here." Mara did not realize she had stopped breathing until her chest started to ache. She stepped closer to the photograph, as if the distance between her and that wall might somehow change what she was seeing. The girl in the picture could not have been more than 19. She stood beside the ticket booth in cutoffs and a tied-up work shirt, one hand on her hip, sunlight in her hair, smiling at whoever had taken the photo like she trusted the world a little more than Mara ever had. There was something unguarded in that smile. Open, bright, alive. And there was no denying the face. The same dark eyes, the same narrow jaw, the same stubborn shape to the mouth. Mara lifted a hand but stopped short of touching the picture. "That's her," she said, though her voice sounded far away. "That's my mother." Dottie stayed quiet for a moment, giving the truth room to land. "Yes," she said softly, "that's Elise Quinn." Mara swallowed. All her life, her mother had existed in fragments. A first name on paperwork, a missing person in every emotional sense of the phrase, no stories, no birthday cards, no explanation worth trusting, just a blank place in the middle of her life that everybody seemed careful not to step into. And now here she was. Not as a ghost, not as a rumor. A real young woman with sun on her face, standing in front of a place that belonged to Mara's blood. Mara stepped back. Her guard came up so fast it was almost visible. "If people here knew her," she said, turning toward Dottie, "then why didn't anybody ever tell me? Why didn't anybody come find me?" Dottie's expression changed. Not the guilt, not exactly. More like an old sorrow being asked to stand up again after years of sitting still. "It wasn't that simple." Mara gave a bitter laugh. "That's what people say when the truth is ugly." Dottie did not argue. Instead, she walked into the office and pulled open a warped metal drawer in the old filing cabinet. She searched through yellowed envelopes, receipts, faded ledgers, then came back holding a small ring of keys and a flashlight. "Come on," she said. Mara didn't move. To where?" "The projection room." The stairs to the booth were narrow and steep, tucked behind a side hall that smelled like mildew, old plywood, and something electrical that had long ago burned itself out. Dottie went first, flashlight beam bouncing against the walls. Mara followed, one hand on the rail, the wood smooth from decades of use. At the top, the door stuck before swinging open. The room beyond was cramped, dusty, and strangely intimate. Two old projectors sat side by side like sleeping machines from another century. Metal film reels lined the shelves. Grease pencils, splicing tape, handwritten labels, and rusting canisters covered nearly every surface. Mara stepped in slowly. It felt less like entering a room and more like stepping into a memory someone had locked up on purpose. Dottie moved her light across the shelves. "Your grandmother kept everything," she said. "Tickets, invoices, program notes, letters people sent after the summer season ended. She believed if you saved enough of a place, some part of it never really died." Mara ran her finger along one of the canisters. Dust coated her skin. "Did my mother work up here?" "Oh, yes." A faint smile passed across Dottie's face. Elise could thread a projector faster than half the boys who bragged about knowing how. She used to climb these stairs two at a time. Mara looked around the room again, trying to picture that girl in the photograph standing where she stood now. Laughing, working, belonging. The thought hit harder than she expected. Because belonging had always felt like something that happened to other people. Dottie bent beside a low cabinet under the work table and tried one of the keys. It didn't fit. She tried another, then another. On the fourth try, the lock clicked. Inside were old account books, a stack of photographs tied with twine, and a dented metal box with a handwritten label taped across the lid. For Elise Sortun. Mara froze. The room seemed to narrow around those two words. Dottie looked up at her. "I never opened it," she said. "Rosalie wouldn't let anyone touch a thing in here after Elise left." Or there was that word again. Plain, convenient, clean. Mara hated it. With careful hands, she lifted the box onto the table and opened the lid. Inside was a small bundle of letters, a cloth pouch, and one short strip of 16mm film wrapped in wax paper. No jewelry, no money, no dramatic secret, just pieces. But sometimes pieces hurt more. Mara picked up the top envelope. The paper was brittle at the fold. On the front, in slanted blue ink, were 3 words. If she comes. Her throat tightened. Not if she asks, not if she wants to know. If she comes. As if somebody had believed all these years that one day Mara might stand in this room and need answers no one had given her. Her fingers trembled as she opened the letter. The first line was enough to take the breath out of her. Elise, if your daughter ever finds her way back here, tell her I never stopped waiting for both of you. Mara stared at the page, then at Dottie, then back at the words again, as if they might rearrange themselves into something easier to bear. But they didn't. And for the first time in her life, the story she had been told about being forgotten began to crack wide open. Mara read the first line 3 times, then a 4th, then once more, slower than before, as if moving carefully through the words might keep them from breaking her open. Elise, if your daughter ever finds her way back here, tell her I never stopped waiting for both of you. Her hands had started to shake, not wildly, just enough to make the paper whisper against her fingers. She swallowed, but the tightness in her throat stayed right where it was. Across from her, Dottie didn't speak. She knew better than to rush grief when it finally found a door. Mara lowered herself into the old projectionist chair like her knees had stopped trusting the rest of her. The room felt smaller now, warmer somehow, not comforting, just close, thick with years she had never been allowed to know. She unfolded the rest of the letter. Rosalie's handwriting slanted hard to the right, neat in some places, hurried in others. The letter was not long, but every line carried weight. Rosalie wrote that Elise had not vanished because she stopped loving her daughter. She had left Red Vale scared of a man named Wade Mercer, who had been using the drive-in grounds after hours years ago for shady deliveries and cash exchanges that never made it into any honest ledger. When Rosalie found out and forced him off the property, things turned ugly. Threats, broken windows, tires slashed in the middle of the night. Elise wanted to go to the sheriff. Rosalie wanted her daughter and baby granddaughter out first. They had planned for Elise to leave town with Mara for a while, just until things cooled down. But somewhere between leaving and starting over, Elise disappeared. No body, no clear answers, only rumors and silence. Rosalie wrote that she had spent years trying to find her. She kept the theater, kept the records, kept everything locked away because she believed that one day either Elise or the child would come back needing proof that the Quinn women had not walked away from each other willingly. By the time Mara reached the last line, her vision had gone blurry. I could not save my daughter. I pray this place helps save her child. Mara lowered the paper and stared at the floorboards. All her life, she had carried one hard belief like a stone in her chest. My mother left because leaving me was easier. Now that stone had cracked, and underneath it was something worse. She had been loved and lost anyway. That truth hurt in a completely different place. Dottie finally spoke, her voice low and steady. Rosalie never gave up on them, not once. Mara laughed, but there was no humor in it. Then where was everybody when I was bouncing between homes? Dottie took that hit without defending herself. Some people knew pieces. Nobody knew enough. And by the time the county records swallowed your name, the trail was colder than it should have been. Mara wiped at her eyes quickly, annoyed that tears had shown up at all. On the table beside the letter sat the strip of 16mm film wrapped in wax paper. Dottie nodded toward it. There's more. Mara hesitated, then unwrapped it carefully. A handwritten label was attached in faded ink. Elise, summer test reel. What is it? Mara asked. Dottie's mouth softened. Maybe the last thing of hers this place ever held. The old projector looked ancient up close, all gears and steel and stubbornness. Dottie moved around it with the ease of someone greeting an old friend. She checked the belt, cleared dust from the gate, threaded the short reel with patient hands. You still know how to run this? Mara asked. Dottie gave her a sideways look. Sweetheart, there are things a woman doesn't forget. Riding a bike, balancing a church casserole in one hand, and threading a projector when the whole town's waiting on a picture. In spite of everything, the corner of Mara's mouth almost moved. Dottie killed the overhead light. The booth fell dim, then the projector clicked alive. Its sound was soft at first, then steady, rhythmic, almost like breathing. The image flickered onto the far wall. At first it was only light and scratches. Then a frame steadied. A summer evening. Cars rolling in, kids running between bumpers. Paper cups, lawn chairs, fireflies blinking over the field. And then the camera swung. A young woman turned toward it, laughing. Elise, not posed this time, not frozen in a photograph. Moving. Alive. She shaded her eyes from the sun and walked closer, smiling at whoever held the camera. For one impossible second, Mara forgot to breathe again. Elise leaned toward the lens and said something silent, lost to time. Then she looked over her shoulder toward the giant screen, and her expression changed, softer. Tim, thoughtful, as if she were already carrying a future nobody else could see. The reel jumped. Another quick image. Elise standing at the ticket booth, one hand resting over the slight curve of her stomach. Pregnant. Mara's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. Dottie looked at the screen, then at Mara. Yeah, she said quietly. That was you. The reel ended with a flutter and a slap. Light kept spinning for a second after the image was gone. Mara sat completely still. She had spent years trying not to imagine her mother, because imagining hurt worse than not knowing. And now she had seen her, heard the shape of her silence, seen the way she smiled, seen proof that before Mara was paperwork, before she was case files and waiting rooms and borrowed bedrooms, she had belonged to someone. Outside, thunder rolled low across the Texas sky. A storm was coming in. Inside the booth, Mara picked up Rosalie's letter again and looked toward the dark field below. The money offer in her bag suddenly felt cheap. Not small, cheap. Because this place was no longer just a broken property with tax problems. It was evidence. It was memory. It was the only witness left that still knew her family's real story. And down in town, whether he realized it or not, Calvin Voss was about to learn there are some ruins people can buy, and some they cannot. By the next afternoon, the storm had passed, but something in Mara had not. She stood in the middle of the starlight field with Rosalie's letter folded in her jacket pocket, the wind moving softly through the weeds, the old screen casting its long shadow across the cracked ground. For the first time in her life, she was not standing inside a question. She was standing inside an answer, a hard one, a painful one, but an answer all the same. Her mother had not thrown her away. Her grandmother had not forgotten her. The silence that shaped her life had not been proof that she was unlovable. It had been proof that fear, danger, and broken systems can bury the truth so deep. A child grows up blaming herself for things she never caused. And once Mara understood that, truly understood it, something steady began to rise where all that old bitterness had lived. Not forgiveness, not all at once, but dignity, the kind that comes slowly, the kind that says, I know who I am now, and I will not sell that for the first price somebody throws at me. When Calvin Voss arrived that afternoon in his polished truck, he stepped out smiling like the deal was already done. He wore pressed jeans, expensive boots, and the kind of easy confidence men tend to wear when they've spent years assuming the world will move aside for them. Mara, he said warmly, as if they were old friends, I figured after a night in this place, you'd be ready to make the sensible choice. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out the purchase offer, and tore it clean in half. Calvin's smile slipped. Then she tore it again. The paper fluttered down near his boots. I'm not selling, she said. The words came out calm, clear, stronger than she felt. For a second, he said nothing. Then the polished tone disappeared. You don't know what you're holding on to, he said. This place is falling apart. It'll bury you in taxes, repairs, permits. You really think sentiment pays the bills? Mara glanced back at the screen, at the ticket booth, at the silent rows where families had once gathered under summer skies. Then she looked at him again. No, she said, but truth matters. And so does a place people were counting on before men like you decided broken things were easier to buy than to respect. Calvin's face cooled. He muttered something about lawyers and deadlines and drove off in a spray of dust. But he was already too late. Because by then, word had started to travel. Small towns do that. They carry news the way dry fields carry wind. By sunset, Dottie came back with a toolbox and a gallon of paint. Evan showed up in an old pickup with extension cords, bulbs, and 2 folding ladders. June Holloway from the school brought poster board and asked if local students could help repaint the concession signs. Even Sheriff Lena Brooks stopped by, leaned against her cruiser and said, Off the record, my first date was here. Be ashamed to lose it. And little by little, the Starlight stopped looking like an abandoned property. It started looking like a place people still loved. They cleared brush, swept floors, repaired wiring, washed windows that had not reflected a face in years. A week later, they held a community movie night. Nothing fancy, just lawn chairs, pickup trucks, kids in hoodies, paper cups of popcorn, and an old projector that still had enough heart left to throw light into the dark. Before the movie started, Mara stood near the screen with a microphone that squealed once before settling down. She looked out at the crowd, at Dottie, at Evan, at families she did not know, and somehow didn't feel like a stranger to anymore. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. My whole life, as she said, I thought being left behind meant I didn't matter. But this place taught me something different. Sometimes what gets lost isn't love. Sometimes it's the truth. And when you finally find it, you get to decide what comes next. The crowd went quiet, real quiet. The kind of quiet that means people are feeling something too big to interrupt. Mara looked up at the screen just as the projector beam came alive behind her. White light cut through the night. And for one breathtaking moment, it felt like the starlight was breathing again. Maybe that is what home really is. Not the place where nothing bad ever happened, but the place where the broken story finally gets told right. So let me ask you something. If the world had taught you that you were forgotten, would you have the courage to stay long enough to learn the truth? And if you found one broken place that still remembered your name, would you walk away from it? If this story moved you, stay with us. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and tell me where you're listening from. Because sometimes the stories that heal us most are the ones that remind us we were never as alone as